and we will record this webinar. So if for some reason you have to drop off at some point, or if you are joining us just watching it on video, welcome. So again, welcome everyone to this event. It's a ClearAdmit MBA Essay Insight event, and I am Graham. I am the co-founder of ClearAdmit. I am going to, that's probably all you really need to know about me. I'm going to stay out of the way here as much as I can and just help navigate us through a handful of really great questions that we have for our guests today. So I wanted to introduce our guests. So let's start with Lisa Killingsworth, who is the Director of Operations, Admissions, and Scholarships at Cornell's SC Johnson College of Business. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you everyone for joining. Excited to share some essay insider information with you today.
It's great to have you again, Lisa. Next up, I would like to introduce Taya Sapp, who's the Senior Associate Director of Admissions over at Michigan Ross. Welcome, Taya.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to sharing more about essays and hopefully calming any fears you might have.
It's a pleasure to have you joining us today. I appreciate you making time. Next up, we've got Ilana Van Allen, who's Director of Strategy and Marketing for the MBA admissions team at UCLA Anderson. Hi, Ilana.
Hi, Graham. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And like my panelist said, looking forward to kind of sharing some essay insights with everyone.
Yeah, this will be a lot of fun. Next up, we've got Rakita Worrell, who's an Associate Director of Full-Time MBA Admissions and Student Recruitment at UNC Kenan-Flagler. Hi, Rakita.
Hi, hello from Chapel Hill. Very excited to be here and share some great information with you all.
It's a pleasure to have you with us today. And last but not least, we've got Laurel Grodman, who's the Managing Director of Admissions, Analytics, and Evaluation at the Yale School of Management. Hey, Laurel.
Hi, Graham. Thanks so much for having me back. This is one of my very favorite events. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that's really sweet of you to say that. I appreciate that. So let's dive in. We've got some kind of roundtable questions that we'll start with, and then we'll get into some specific questions that we have for each of the programs that have joined us today. So we'll go back up to the top and start with Lisa over at Cornell. This first question is pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to understand, when do you read the essays in an application? Is it like the first thing or the last thing you look at? And then how much time do you typically spend when you sit down with an application?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to kind of answer it in reverse. I would say on average, we probably spend about 30 minutes reading an application, kind of from start to finish, and it'll kind of depend on the applicant and the things that they include in their application. So that changes a little bit for everybody. But where the essays fall in that kind of 30-minute evaluation typically are right in the middle. So we typically receive and review your, resume, your transcripts and academic information, and then that kind of flows into your goals. And then from your goals, we're really into your essays. So right in the middle, after we've gotten a little bit of a picture of who you are, we want to be able to know a little bit of background information. And then when we get to your essays, that's where we get to see something not on paper, where you have the opportunity to tell us who you are kind of outside of your transcripts and your resume. So it's one of my favorite pieces of the application, because it's one of the only areas in the application where you as the applicant actually have the opportunity to share something with us that is genuine and real and kind of who you are outside of the paper.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's been a recurring theme as we've been doing these events for the last few weeks. Not only is it that the essays are this kind of chance for the applicant to express themselves, but also it's been a recurring theme where everyone says this is like one of the favorite parts, to kind of look at this part of the file and watch the sort of candidacy come to life. I did want to just interrupt with a little housekeeping note, and that is to remind everyone that's joining us today that at the end of this main session, each of these programs is going to bounce off into an individual Zoom breakout. We will furnish you with the links in the chat, and you also get an email with all the links to those individual Zooms so that you can ask questions of the programs directly and yeah, just in a kind of breakout after this main session. So I just want to remind everyone of that. Let's move on though and talk with Taya. How does it work at Ross? And yeah, when do you read the essays? How much time are you spending reading a file?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for myself personally. We all have different, I think, different approaches to reading the application, but I think myself and most people on our team read the resume first. That is really what we look at to get a snapshot of your overall experience and a quick look at where you are professionally and what you've accomplished to date. After that, then I start to look at the essays and kind of like Lisa said, see the color beyond the resume and what you're interested in and where your passions may lie. So definitely look at the resume first, but then the essays are, like we said, kind of the color portion of that. And often, we're learning new things about you that we wouldn't have learned otherwise. I probably spend about 20 to 30 minutes on each application. And I think I'm probably similar to my other colleagues here. I'm not the only one who reads it. So as one person, 20 to 30 minutes, and then there'll be other readers for the whole application as well.
Okay, excellent. And you've just raised a really important point that I try to stress with candidates who, come to our events or engage with us on our website. And that is that if it is 20 or 30 minutes, that's just one read, and that everyone who's applying to business school, their file will be read more than once. I think sometimes candidates are like, wait, what? 30 minutes? I just spent, hours and hours like pouring my heart and soul into this. So yeah, there are several reads that go into a holistic review of a file. So just keep that in mind, everybody. Let's move on. Ilana, let's hear from you. How do you all do it at UCLA, or you in particular? Like, when do you read the essays and how much time are you typically spending?
Yeah, sure. So my answer is very similar to my colleagues. So on average, I say each application reader will take about 20 to 30 minutes to read an application. Again, it kind of depends on the complexity of the application, and complexity is not so much on, numbers or whatnot. It's usually if their academic history, maybe they went to multiple schools, so we have to sort that out, or maybe they have a more complex career history where we have to look more specifically at the start dates and the end dates and figure out the career jumps. So that's kind of what usually adds to the complexity. It's not so much the strength or weakness of a file. And when we're actually evaluating the applications, at the end of the day, we're trying to find your story. And this is something you're going to hear a lot from me throughout this panel. And if you ever talk to me one-on-one, that at the end of the day, we want to know what you were doing before business school, what you want to do after business school, and how an MBA, and in our case, an MBA from UCLA Anderson, will help you achieve those goals. So we're going through your application to try to put your story together. We generally read the application in the same order that you're actually seeing it when you put the application together. We have about 10 subsections, and we're generally reading it in that same order, at least for an initial pass through. We will then likely jump around to, again, if we're missing some part of your story or need some more clarity, we'll kind of jump around. So as you'll see in our application, which just went live a couple of days ago, the essay is about in the middle to end of our application, and that's intentional. We want to be able to kind of build up to the various elements of your profile, of your story, to ultimately kind of culminate in this essay where you can use it to either bring your story together or complement the information you've already provided. But like my colleagues also said, that's just one reader. We have multiple readers through our application process. Then also we have inputs from our interviewer as well. So that all kind of comes together throughout various parts of the review process.
Got it. Super helpful. Yeah, I love hearing these kind of insights into how, just how you kind of think about the essays within the context of the overall, profile and yeah, just piecing things together. Rakita, let's talk with you about this. How do you go about looking at the file, and yeah, when do you read the essays? How much time are you spending?
So I would read an essay. It lands almost in the middle of our application. So at that point, we've already reviewed your resume. We do have an additional section for someone to share their employment history. We have background, demographic information, et cetera. So by the time I get to your essay, we're right in the middle. For me, it takes about 30 minutes to read an application. I'm also typically a second person to review. So it's already been to an initial reader who may spend upwards of 45 minutes reading an application. And again, there's a lot of factors that would make that shorter or a little bit longer, just depending on how much digging we have to do. But when I say we read applications in the middle, I may get to the end of an application and reviewing interview notes and then go back to an essay. So essays are something that I will frequent throughout the review session. And that's because it's really important. We love to hear your voice. We love to know more about your story and your journey, everything that has led you to this point. And sometimes that essay really provides, that type of depth that we're looking for.
Okay, yeah, really helpful. Laurel, you've been patient. Tell us a little bit about how it works at Yale.
I agree with what many of my colleagues here have already shared in terms of, we don't necessarily have a single prescriptive way that everyone in the team reads, but I think generally speaking, similarly, a typical application read takes about 30 minutes. The essay comes after having gained an understanding of the sort of the academic history, the work history. The one thing I'll add, which I'm not sure I ever shared publicly before, but feels relevant here, is also underscoring the point some of my colleagues have made. Not everyone's file is being read in one particular way by everyone on the team. So we do have 2 readers on every file who are kind of giving a full read. I actually will come in myself and maybe 1 or 2 other members of my team, and at a point where we're fairly sure that a file is not going to move forward, I'll actually take another look at that file, and I'll very often start with the essay, just a very quick speed read of the essay, just to make sure that there isn't some element of context that I should be layering onto the other elements of the application that I'm going to scan. So it's definitely not the primary use of the essay within our process, but it's sort of a final gut check to say, as I take a quick look at this file before we're pretty sure we're not going to move on with it, let me just make sure there's nothing coming up kind of qualitatively within the essay that should prompt me to think differently about the rest of the file.
Got it. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think one thing that's been underlined here is that, yeah, each of you, you're working in teams, there are multiple readers of a file, it's traveling through a process. And so I feel like candidates get quite a bit of attention, even those, I know that there's always these rumors out there about how, some files are just kind of, that someone glances at it and says, yeah, we're not taking this person, that's it. But that's not how this happens at all. I mean, I feel like everyone is given a lot of time in all of your processes. So I do see there's like a number of questions popping up in the chat. And I did want to just remind everyone, if you have questions, you can hang on to them, and the schools are going to each pop off into an individual breakout where they can address any questions that you have. So we'll just kind of keep moving ahead here. I appreciate everyone kind of pulling back the veil a little bit on your process of how you read. Lisa, let's go back to you. I wanted to talk about your essays at Cornell Johnson. And, the main thing that I want you to do is pick out one of your essays. And I believe we have multiple slides. So for all of you, if you have more than one essay question, they may be spread across a couple of slides. You can just direct us, whichever one you want to point us to. But if you could pick out one question and give us just some insight into like, where did this question come from? Why are you asking it? What are you looking for when you're kind of reading a response? And then if you have like a tidbit of advice for a candidate who's literally just now sitting down, starting to sketch out like what they might want to talk about, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, so up here on the screen is our kind of goals section, our goals essay for the Cornell Johnson application. We have 2 required essays. This is one of them. The main reason we've decided to structure this question in this way, this essay in this way, it's kind of a fill in the blank. We're kind of looking for you to think about your short-term goals, your long-term goals as you're filling out your application. And that's for a couple of reasons. The structure here, my goal is to work as a blank role at a company within an industry. You're popping answers into these blanks that will then kind of auto-fill this section. And then there's a short, succinct kind of goals essay for you to elaborate on what you're kind of hoping to do following the MBA and why and how this all ties together. We are really looking for candidates to be thinking about this in the application process. We think having a general sense of what your goals might be as you're going into the application process are beneficial to you, the applicant. This also really helps inform our interview conversation, because during an interview process, we are absolutely going to be kind of picking your brain about your short-term, long-term goals. And really we want to see that you've begun to think about this, you've begun to do maybe a little bit of research and kind of formulate what some of your targets might be. This is really important to us at Johnson because we are really priding ourselves on applicant success in recruiting, kind of following the MBA. So as you're thinking about your goals, does this make sense at Johnson? What resources can you use at Johnson? And then during our conversations with you in an interview, we're really, just ensuring that this is achievable for you. I think as far as what this further kind of helps us with in an evaluation of your candidacy is just that you've begun to formulate this and that you've begun to think about it. Of course, goals change, things change, targets change. You can get into the MBA and completely change your mind. That is totally fine. We're really just looking for you to have started to think about this. And then it also kind of helps you inform like, well, why are you getting an MBA? So this kind of all ties neatly together into that. And I think for advice, as you're going into your kind of an application process this year and exploring schools, definitely take some time to pop on LinkedIn or Google and do some searches about, where you think you might want to land kind of following the MBA. And a good way to do that too is to have some conversations with folks who might work in some of those companies.
Got it. Yeah. One of the things that I heard, I don't remember who it was that said it, but it was interesting to me. Someone once said that even though your goals may change, as you just said, when you get to business school, that just the act of going through this thought process of trying to figure out where you might land is useful, such that if you pivot off of those goals when you arrive in business school in some way, shape, or form, what the sort of process is like in terms of thinking it through. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So great advice. I did want to ask you about one of your other questions, which I think we have on the other slide here. And this is the sort of what we call around the office at Clearman, we've called this like the impact essay.
Yes.
So for this essay, you signal pretty strongly that, a good response is going to be informed by discussions with, members of the kind of Cornell Johnson community. And so I just sort of wondered, that seems like it's almost like a requirement that someone's going to need to sort of take that step and reach out. Do you think that it would be possible to answer this question if you hadn't, if you're just kind of reading stuff online or something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for any school you're considering, it's always a great idea to connect with the community. Part of, assessment on your end, assessment on our end is this thing we call fit. Are you a good fit with the program? Does this program fit you? And we believe that part of figuring that out is to have some conversations with folks that are part of the community. At Johnson, we offer a variety of ways to do that throughout the year, whether it be virtual events, on-campus events, sitting in on a class, other kind of admissions things that are going on. That being said, it is definitely not a requirement that you do that. I think there's still a variety of ways you can demonstrate an interest in Cornell. Show us that you've looked into a couple things that you might identify as things you might want to get involved with at Johnson. And then, of course, part of this, essay is talking about impact in the communities that you serve. So that's also a piece that you can kind of elaborate on in this essay as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Appreciate you indulging on that question. And I just wanted to make sure we touch on all of these to the extent that we can. Let's move on. Taya, let's talk a little bit about Ross. And yeah, feel free to introduce us to one of your essays and give us the background on it and any advice you have, how the team kind of looks at it. And I think, again, we have a couple of slides here, so feel free to direct us to the right one.
I can do this one. This is one of my favorite parts of the essay. So we'll focus on this. So we've had this essay one for a few years now. And it's basically, there's a few different prompts that you get to choose from. So you'll need to do 2 different essays for this. Each one is 100 words, as you can see. But you get a choice of what essay you want to be writing and what you want to be telling us about yourself. I think I'll start with one thing you won't see in our essays is we don't ask why Ross. We don't have you say, tell us why Ross is a great fit for you. You're not going to see that in our essays. We did used to have that. It just came across as really inauthentic. it felt like people were like, we were reading our own website a lot of times. And so we took that out and went in this direction because these questions get at traits that help us understand why Ross from you. One thing Ross is really known for is learning by doing. We have MAP projects and student investment funds and a lot of opportunities for students to be really getting their hands dirty and challenging themselves in new ways, and lots of opportunities to be humbled and challenged and going out of their comfort zone that are exactly what our prompts are. And so what we're getting at with these essays is your personality traits. What types of things from your past behavior are going to be indicative of how you might be as a student, what type of classmate you're going to be. We get a lot of questions around, should these be personal? Should they be professional? And it's really your choice. I've seen great essays that are professional responses or personal responses, but I'd really encourage everyone to think about what they're submitting across the whole application. So we're going to see your resume. We're going to see your letter of recommendation. We have another essay, a new essay this year about your resume too, that gives you another chance. This is a chance for us to get to know what you might be like outside of work. So, you know, we're going to know what you're like at 9 a.m., but help us understand what you're like at 9 p.m. You know, get to know the full you, what your passions are, what you care about, how you've challenged yourself, what you really want people to know about you that might not be on your resume. And so I think this helps us understand the why Ross, because these kind of get at some of the things that help us understand if you're going to be, you know, a great fit for our community. The other thing I would say is, you know, you'll hear a lot of us from admissions say, be your authentic self. And I get that question like, well, what does that mean? I don't know how to, you know, like, I know these traits, you know, like I know the school values these things. So I want to make sure that, you know, I have those. And so I think that what I usually tell people is start with what matters to you. And don't, you know, you don't need to be like, look, we're not looking for 2 or 3 traits, you know, that'd be pretty boring for us to read and for you to have in as your classmates, for if people only possess 2 or 3 things. So really think about what matters to you and not so much what, you know, like what the school is known for, because that's what's going to help you stand out in an authentic way.
Got it. That's really interesting. I've looked at these questions a lot, and I hadn't thought of them in that through that lens of, you know, thinking about the fit with your community as well. So very interesting and good advice. I have a question about your, I guess we'll call it your kind of career goals essay, which I think we have on a separate slide here. So so this is technically essay 3. And the thing that I just wanted to ask you about this one is it checks in at just 175 words, which is shorter than most. And I just wondered, like, so given this sort of tight word limit, what do you think applicants should prioritize in terms of conveying in this essay?
Yeah, all of our essays are concise. We are we're getting people in the mindset of concise communication, which you're going to be learning a lot about in business school. But having you start to do that as a prospective student, as an applicant, we also narrow things down. You don't see us asking about your long-term career goal. We are specifically asking about your short-term career goal. As I was just talking about, we're not asking about why Ross. I mean, if it fits in an authentic way, you can include those things. If it's going to be relevant to you sharing what your short-term career goal is to reach your long-term career goal, like you can certainly include it if it makes sense, but those aren't things we're looking for. We do have these shorter essays really to, you know, allow you to focus and help us understand your career goal right to the point. Similar to when I was talking about earlier, when we asked why Ross, people would sometimes, you know, it felt like we were reading the website, even if it was authentic, it didn't. But this, I think when we have this, sometimes people tend to put a lot of jargon, a lot of technical, you know, like I want to be the CEO of a company, and a lot of additional context that really doesn't understand us, the why of why they want to do that career goal.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. This was not intentional, but obviously, Lisa, with the Cornell question about goals being very, you know, concise and specific, there's some themes here, and I think, it is it's worth noting that it sounds like you all really, you just really want to know, like, what is the goal and why is that, in this case, the right goal for the candidate, and maybe don't need to do a lot more, and they don't have a lot of space to do a lot more anyway. So I think that makes sense. All right, let's move on. Ilana, tell us a little bit about, this essay, or I think this is the one, right? So you're kind of limited in what you can discuss, right? You just have the one.
Yeah. So UCLA Anderson's full-time MBA application essay section is comprised of one essay, which is only 250 words. We do have 2 short answer questions that do touch on career goals and more of specifics on why you are interested in coming to Anderson. So I can cover those in the breakout session. And for just as a quick note, the idea that these are short answers and are no longer essays is relatively new, and that goes back to the goal of being concise as well. We want direct answers to the questions, and I think that's kind of just a general tip, like just make sure you're actually answering the questions we're asking in the most concise, focused, and if possible, specific way. By all means, use the Cornell model as you're thinking about answering our questions for the career goals, because that's basically the same information that we're looking for. But as to our one essay question, this is actually completely new this year. So we're really excited about this, and you're probably the first group to hear anyone from the admissions team really talk about it in depth. But so what we really wanted to do in this essay question is kind of give our applicants the space to speak about something they're just proud to share with us that they didn't necessarily have room to do so elsewhere in the application. It's as simple as that. And then kind of the second part of the question on how it connects to your MBA goals. Again, this goes back to what I was saying before about basically how does this achievement and how does the information you're providing us further add to, expand, or explain your story of what you were doing before business school, what you want to do after business school, and how's an MBA from Anderson going to help you achieve those goals. So kind of take the time to think about an achievement that you kind of really help you feel like set the course of what you at least wanted to get out of your MBA degree. And what you get out of your MBA degree can be tied to career goals. It can be tied to extracurricular goals. It can be tied to leadership goals. It can be tied to personal goals. It doesn't matter. We in the admissions committee don't have a preference. All we care is that you kind of connect whatever that achievement is to what you want to do during your MBA program and what you want to get out of the MBA degree. And again, this as specific as you can as it relates back to UCLA Anderson. The better, because again, it ties back to that full story. We're really excited about this question because it kind of looks both into the past and into the future. Again, the past is where you kind of get to speak to your achievement. The future is how it connects to your future MBA goals. And it kind of just gives a little more taste of like how you see your future at Anderson and then beyond. And those that are able to tie it into the larger story are the ones who are going to be most successful in effectively using this essay question. And I think that's the case in general, like regardless of what we're asking, UCLA Anderson, we don't give you many words to beyond this one essay question throughout the application to fill in the missing pieces of your story. So you have to use the space we give you as effectively as possible in the most concise possible way. I forgot to mention, I'm an alum of Anderson, and I remember I came into applying to business schools completely blind. I was a science major, my whole family's the medical profession or engineers. I didn't know anyone who pursued an MBA. And I was expecting at the time the essay questions were a lot longer, we had a lot more words. I made a very, very creative essay. I threw in puns, I threw in, creative writing styles. And honestly, it was probably very entertaining to read on the other end, and I did answer the questions that were being asked. So obviously I got admitted into Anderson, but know that is not the priority. What is the priority is to directly answer the questions. And I wish I knew that because I would have taken a lot of stress out of me. So just kind of keep that in mind. And just kind of a general tip as you're thinking about this question, again, this is the first year we're personally asking it at UCLA Anderson, is I recommend start backwards. Think about what are your MBA goals. And again, that ties to what my amazing admissions colleagues have already spoken to already. Make sure you actually have clear MBA goals, and those can change. It's okay, but at least have them so you know what you're working towards. And then kind of work backwards. How did you arrive to those goals? What were the aha moments that you had throughout your career, throughout your extracurriculars, throughout your leadership opportunities that made you kind of basically come to those goals. And then those usually will have achievements tied to it. And then you can pick one of those and speak to that. So in my opinion, working backwards may actually be beneficial in kind of putting together your essay prompt response.
Okay. Yeah. And I did note that this is a new question for this year. I also, I think it's really interesting that you talk about how when you applied, things were a little bit different. And I was actually just thinking about that as you were, as you all have been speaking about how when I applied to business school, it was like 2,000 words across maybe 4 essays per institution. So things have really changed in that respect. I did want to just ask you one kind of quick follow-up, Alana, and that is, last year you guys asked a question which was more about, something, what was it? It was about how, whether or not, talking about a current event and how it's impacted the candidate, and which is kind of a very like macro sort of view. And this seems like very much more of a micro view, like starting with the candidate, something that they've done. And so was there any reason for that, or like what prompted you to head in this direction? Because it's kind of a really different direction.
Yeah, that's a great question, Graham. So the last few years, we had a question that kind of tied to how specific events or an event impacted you. And those events could have been global scale, namely things like COVID or whatnot, or they could have been something in your personal life. We had no preference between the two. Could be professional, could be non-professional, didn't matter. We honestly wanted at the time to honor all the massive change that was happening around the world, and know that, and kind of acknowledge the fact that a lot of those changes ultimately probably did impact one's goals in life, whether it be professional or not. So we wanted to give the space for students to kind of reflect on those moments, knowing that basically around the world, everyone was feeling some sense of change for various reasons. Again, whether in your individual lives or globally. Now that we're 3 years into the pandemic, and people are trying at least to kind of resume back into what is a normal life, normal in quotes or whatever that means. We wanted to shift from kind of the external to more of the internal. We wanted to focus more on the applicant's individual impact that they have made and how that has either inspired or influenced their goals kind of going into the future. So we wanted to kind of narrow down the scope a little bit, like you said, go from macro to micro a little bit. And just again, like have that opportunity for applicants to kind of, again, think less about the external impacts and more about your own personal impact that you've made and how that's influenced your goals. So it's kind of transitions from this larger scale down to the bottom, but to a smaller scale. But at the end of the day, it's basically asking the same question, or we're getting the same information out of it.
Right. Okay. Great. Appreciate you shedding some light on that. Rakita, let's talk a little bit about UNC. Again, you can pick one of your questions, and yeah, just let us know if you need us to. I think we have more than one slide here, but let us know, and then yeah, tell us where the question came from and what you're looking for as you review it.
Sure. So we do have 2 required essays, and the first one is quite similar to what we've been talking about today, and focusing on those immediate goals and making sure that a candidate has really thought and been intentional in their pursuit of an MBA and what they hope to do next. But I want to spend some time talking about essay 2, which is focusing on inclusive leadership. So through of course, our holistic application review, we're assessing a candidate's preparedness for the MBA. We're thinking about how we can help them achieve their goals and how we can, play a role in what they hope to do next professionally. But we're also beginning to envision who they'll be as a student in our community. And this question really gives us insight on how they'll contribute, what type of team member they'll be, how they might impact others. And this is all related to UNC Kenan-Flagler's core values. So we have 4 that really anchor us and inform our approach to the type of community we have and the work that we do. And those are integrity, inclusion, innovation, and impact. And so this question really touches on that inclusion and impact piece. But as a business school built from the core values up, as we love to say, we already want to begin hearing from the student, is this a place that you can see yourself at? Is this a place that you would thrive? Is this a place where you would positively contribute and impact others? Are you the type of team member that others would like to have in their group? And do you in some ways align with our community values? Ensuring that we have a diverse and inclusive community is top of importance to us. We want students to come here to feel welcome, to feel like they belong, to feel safe, and all that contributes to a really enriching and supportive and learning environment. And so what better place to already begin telling them who we are, and also hearing whether or not they're attracted to that, than right there in the essay questions. And I would say with this question, it's just as important for us to hear from you as it is for you to begin reflecting on what you want your MBA experience to be. I wouldn't say this is the easiest question to answer, because it challenges you to think more about inclusion and inclusivity, and depending on maybe your lived experiences, your community, your background, where you are in the world, this could mean very different to you. But we want to plant that seed early, because it's definitely something that's going to continue to be a part of your experience here, both through the curriculum as well as outside the classroom. So reflection is key here when you think about how you might approach this essay and what you want to share with us.
Got it. Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And I think I like the fact that it's quite broad in terms of how you can think of examples, right? Because you talk about, just getting together with other people to share and learn, or, negotiating differences, and, you have engaging in diplomacy. Like, there are lots of ways that sort of thing happens. So it seems like people would have a nice range of things to sort of choose from in talking about this. So I did want to ask you a follow-on question that actually relates to this career goals essay. And I know we've been kind of talking a lot about career goals in this session, but this is a little bit of a different question. And that is that you guys ask about what I would call like a backup plan, right? It says, should your goals that you provided not transpire, what other opportunities would you explore? And I think this is really fascinating. So I just want to know, like, where does that come from? Is that like, what's the purpose of that exercise? And I think it's really interesting, and it probably is. I'm sure that the career office loves this at your institution, because it makes sure that people have like a couple of ideas, right, coming into the MBA. But where did it come from?
Absolutely. And it's because, when you're planning for your future career, there are things that you can absolutely control and prepare for, but there are a lot of variables that will be completely out of your control. We want to ensure that our students are prepared for that. And are already thinking about that. If plan A doesn't work out, what is plan B? So this question gives us insight into their flexibility, how coachable they are, whether or not they thought about that, what would happen next if we couldn't get you to where you wanted to go immediately. And I think this was talked about at the beginning of our conversation, that we want those clear, concise, specific goals. We want to hear those. But you may get into an MBA program and things change. You may find something else that piques your interest. The economy at large may dictate kind of what opportunities are available, legislation, whatever it may be. There's so many things that could happen. And we just want to make sure we're preparing our students for that. And also just giving them an opportunity to just think about, what could be some really great backup plans, because ultimately, pursuing an MBA is an investment into yourself. We want to make sure you see that return on investment, and ultimately you'll be happier, we'll be happier if at the end of the program, when you're walking across that stage, that you're really excited about your next opportunities, and that you felt like you've achieved what you came here to do.
Got it. Yeah, I appreciate you elaborating on that. And again, I think it sounds like a fun exercise. And it also, we talked about this earlier in both the context of I guess, Ross and Johnson. We're talking about how, goals change. So there's this potential for things to shift once you arrive on campus. So I think it's interesting that you guys have the candidates doing some of that thinking in advance here. Laurel, you've been very patient. Yale's at the end of the alphabet, but I promise for the lightning round questions, we'll start with you. So, so again, you guys just have one question. So we only have the one slide. So I'll let you speak to it and explain a little bit about its background and how you go about assessing someone's response.
Sure thing. So as you mentioned, yes, we have one essay question where we ask you to describe the biggest commitment you've ever made. And I think this is our 7th year running using this question. And we do go back and assess our application every year and think about this question, whether it's the one that we want to continue to ask. And We continue to find it useful and engaging, and so we've stuck with it. But way back when we launched this question, we'd actually developed it in collaboration with Amy Wisniewski, who is a professor of organizational behavior at Yale SOM and one of the lead faculty members involved in our core kind of leadership courses within our integrated curriculum. And Professor Wisniewski's area of interests for her research purposes include things like how people make meaning of work in difficult contexts, their experience of work as a job versus a career or a calling. So all sorts of interesting things, all of which is to say we trust her deeply with helping us formulate aspects of our application. And the reason that this one was particularly appealing when we came upon it with her was that we believe that your time in business school and the path that you take from there on out really represents significant commitments in your life. And it's valuable for us to understand the behaviors that have supported your significant commitments of major importance prior to coming to business school. We're very much believers that past experiences and behavior will shape and help predict your future behavior. And so this question is really just that. It's helping us understand how you've approached the major commitments you've taken in your life to date. And so, more broadly, thinking about how this connects to your experience at Yale SOM, we're looking for people who are thoughtful and committed to making an impact in the communities that they're a part of. So once again, we're looking for evidence of this in your past commitments. It doesn't always mean that you're the person who's out in front, but being able to sustain a commitment and take appropriate actions on something that's meaningful to you is once again something that we're really interested in seeing and understanding. And I hope that this will be your experience of our application more broadly. We're very kind of evidence-based. We're looking for not just theoretical, what would you do, but more what have you done? And you'll see this throughout our interview process as well. We're looking for a lot of, like I said, that evidence-based behavior. I do want to put into some perspective how we use this within our process. I know it makes perfect sense to me that we dedicate this much time to talking about and thinking about the essay. I know how much effort our candidates and candidates to all business schools put into putting your essay together. But I will say within the SOM process, I don't want to overblow the importance of the essay within your overall application. It is a data point. It is a sort of point in time that you're talking about versus obviously the time you've spent in school, the time you've spent in your career is extremely important to us and gives us a lot of this sort of evidence-based information that we're looking for. And so I say that not to say your essay isn't important and that you shouldn't spend time on it, but that don't sort of misplace how much importance you put on this element of your application versus all of the other things that you've spent years and years developing and honing. But when it comes to the SOM essay specifically, I do have a couple of points of advice that I think people have found helpful over the years. And so the first thing that you're obviously thinking about is, what do I write about? What's the topic? So our prompt is intentionally broad, and it's intentional to allow you to capture any type of commitment that you think is relevant here. So it can be personal, it could be professional, it can be a really specific activity that you've devoted yourself to, or it could be something more expansive, like an ideal. One type of commitment is not inherently better than another. Like I've been trying to stress, we really care the most about how you've approached that commitment, and you should spend the bulk of the time in your essay talking not about why you chose a given topic, but really how you've gone about expressing your commitment to that topic over time. Like I said, don't worry so much about what the topic is. I think the advice I typically give is, when you hear this prompt, what are the first 2 to 3 things that come to mind to you? I mean, we've all dedicated ourselves to various things over the course of our lives. It's probably 2 or 3 things that are going to come to mind when you hear this question, and just pick the one that you feel like you can write most readily about. You don't have to worry about being memorable or unique. I get asked all the time, what are some of the most memorable responses that you've gotten? And I never like to answer that question, because what's memorable to me is not necessarily what got someone into the school. I think I've been very clear about what we're looking for in the essay, and the ones that I think have the greatest additive value to your application at all are just things that have shown sustained commitment, whether that commitment itself is really glamorous and exciting or something more kind of run of the mill. The last thing that I'll mention is word count. I think we've sort of touched upon word count a little bit throughout my colleagues' various discussions. And Graham, I do remember back in the day when I was applying to business school, I'm an alum of Yale SOM myself as well. And I think I remember writing 4 essays that were at least 500 words each. And I think to myself, now, my gosh, I wouldn't want to read 2,000 words on myself. I'm sure no one else would have either. In some sense, I almost feel like these word limits are we're saving you from yourselves in a way. It's a really valuable skill to be able to distill your ideas into kind of digestible units. And so very rarely in your professional careers will you be asked to expound on something for more than 500 or so words. So it's a really good skill to be able to boil down all of these important things that you're trying to get across in a fairly concise way. And so I would view these word limits not as a limitation, but as really as an opportunity to be concise and get across the points that you really want to put out there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, really appreciate you taking us through kind of where this question came from and how it fits into the overall application. It sounds like some of the pressure is off a little in terms of it's not, it's not a make or break thing. I did want to ask though, and I know we've talked about this at length in the past, so I'm going to have a slightly different question than what I normally ask you, which is, do you ever get essays where people are like, oh, the biggest commitment that I've ever made is taking the plunge to try to go and get an MBA? And I would assume that that's not a great use of this space, but I mean, have you seen that? Do people do that or?
Yeah, for sure. And that is an interesting sort of take on it. So again, putting judgment aside, I don't think there are good or bad essay topics. It's all about how you approach it. I think that is a challenging starting point for doing the kinds of things that I'm talking about, because you're, it's hard to not have to go out really widely into your background to sort of tell your story of why you what led you up to this moment. So again, I don't want to be overly prescriptive. There could be a good essay in there about that topic, but if you're going to sort of walk us through your schooling and your work experience and why all of that has led you up until this moment, it's very broad. It's very hard to get into the specifics about how you have approached this. And so I think that I would probably go as far as to recommend staying away from that as a commitment. I think you'll really find it hard to get specific enough to get at the kind of experience-based essay that we're looking for.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot on that
No.
one.
I definitely do get that. So it's a
Yeah.
fair question.
Yeah, I know. And in the past, we've often talked about whether or not like getting like personal stuff, like getting married or having a child,
Yeah.
like if that counts. And I know that you've been very vehement about saying, hey, there's no wrong answer, and people do write about that stuff, and that's perfectly fine. Like that they should write about what is the biggest commitment, and then let things sort of unfold from that. But
I think
yeah.
that's right. Yeah. And again, what may feel mundane to you, or you may think, well, everyone else has some version of, commitment to family or commitment to community or whatever it might be. That's okay. Again, we're not looking for the most unique topic. We're really looking at how you approach that. And, committing to another person or committing to your family or whatever it might be, those are significant investments. And so I think you can write a very good essay about that. The one caveat I'll give to what I said before about the applying to business school, I also don't want to assume that experience is equally challenging or not challenging for everyone. I think that we have come upon essays where, the act of applying to business school is not a given. It's not just a matter of it's hard to do this on top of my job or on top of my personal commitments. I think there have been examples of where people really have applied to school under very, very challenging circumstances. Either in sort of the time they're doing it or more broadly within their lives. And so I don't want to discount what that looks like. I would have it go above and beyond the just run of the mill task of applying to business school.
Got it. Okay. So we have about like 10 minutes left, and we have some fun lightning round questions that will just allow you guys to give some additional tips to the audience, but also some insights into your programs. And then we have kind of a fun question as well. So Laura, let's stay with you. How would you describe the Yale SOM community in 3 words?
So the 3 words that I identified here were curious, committed, and idealistic.
Okay. Got it. We'll go backwards through the alphabet here. Rakita, Kenan-Flagler, what are 3 words that you would use to describe the student community there?
Engaged, connected, and supportive.
Okay, terrific. Ilana, how about at UCLA Anderson?
I'm going to expound a little bit more on my 3 for a second, but diverse, which ties into our core value of thinking differently. And when I say diverse, from different backgrounds, experiences, interests, goals. Second one would be driven. That ties into our second core value of drive change. So our Anderson MBAs really just want to make a difference in this world, wherever they may want to do it. And our third is collaborative, which ties directly into our third core value, which is share success. So we very much believe in that shared success model of working together for kind of a common goal to succeed and make a change.
Okay, excellent. Taya, how about you? What would you say for Ross, the Ross student community?
Definitely authentic. That was the first thing that came to mind, but I'd also say passionate and effervescent.
Ooh, effervescent. I don't think, yeah, we've been doing these for a few weeks in a row with a lot of different schools, and that is a word that I've not heard yet. That's
I
good
think
one.
it's good.
Excellent.
Accurate.
And Lisa, how about Cornell Johnson? What would be the words that you would use?
Yeah, I think our community is encouraging. If you take the chance to get to know us, we are genuine, and we have a very inclusive community.
Okay, terrific. So let's stay with you, Lisa, and we're going to go back down the other way here. The next question that we have is, I just would love to get one piece of non-essay advice for applicants that are interested in, in Johnson. So yeah, anything you have that's not essay related.
Yeah, this might scare some folks, but you spend this time right now exploring programs and trying to figure out how to do all these different components of the application. You will then eventually start gaining admission to programs, and you then have a tough decision to make. You have to decide ultimately where you're going to invest, your time and development, and in a lot of cases, the money for a program. So my biggest piece of advice as you're going through this process is definitely get to know the community, engage, talk to current students, make sure this is the place you want to spend, these 2 years of growth for yourself.
Yeah, that's terrific advice. I do sometimes feel like in these competitive admissions processes where, obviously you're all at very selective schools, that people get so they get kind of wrapped up in the getting in, and even in the kind of what am I going to do after, right? The goals and that
Yeah.
there's less thought given to the wait, this is 2 years of my life and I need to be somewhere that's going to be the right place for me. So
100%.
definitely encourage everyone to think about that. Taya, how about you? What's one piece of non-essay advice you have for applicants that want to go to Ross?
Yeah, I think it's kind of going off of what Lisa said, but I think it's really helpful for you to get to know the school better. That I feel like that makes your interview stronger. It makes you more confident that you are choosing the right school, and when you know it well. And so I'd say talk to students and alums, ask students about our MAP program, ask them why they chose Ross. I used authentic. They will be honest with you, but also ask them what's not on the website. There's a lot of new programs that start every year at Ross that we haven't had time to make a website for yet. So talk to students about what you might not be able to find on your own.
Okay, terrific. Alana, how about with UCLA Anderson, one piece of non-essay advice?
Yeah, so I was going to say, connect with our community, but since that's been stated already, I'll go with more tactical advice. And I think I said this on the last panel. Basically, try not to use jargon in your application as much as possible, and that's in your resume and when you're speaking to people, to our students in the interview process. Because instead try to distill whatever you're trying to say down to transferable skills and information that is relevant to your story, your career goals, and why Anderson. So many people may come from various industries where there's lots of jargon that the admissions committee honestly probably at this point does know, but it will help you more clearly communicate your story if you're able to extract what that jargon actually means when telling your story.
Yeah, I cannot agree more with this. I used to read files when I was an admissions officer, and yeah, boy, the jargon. There's certain industries where there seems to be a lot of it too. So yeah, just speaking. I always tell people to, I don't know, try to describe what you do in a way that an English professor would, who's someone who's super bright but maybe not well versed in business, would be able to sort of follow along.
Right.
All right, Rikita, how about you? One piece of non-essay advice for candidates considering Kenan-Flagler.
Well, I'll add that when getting to know a school, don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. That's a good skill to go ahead and to practice, because you'll also use it when you're interviewing for jobs and employment afterwards. But ask the tough questions. That's going to give you more information to make the best decision for you. But when it comes to the application, I would say have someone that you know very well read your essays or read your application, and then also have someone that you don't know well. And I think both of the feedback that they share will give you some idea of, have I answered the question? Have I been clear? Can someone who doesn't know me understand what I'm trying to convey throughout my application? And then the person who does know you very well might be able to say, does this feel authentic to who you know? And really share whether or not it's a great highlight of who you are. So that would be my nugget.
I love that. I mean, I have often heard people say, "Oh, get someone who knows you to read your application and just see, after they've read it, if they feel like it's you, that kind of thing." But this idea of also having someone who maybe doesn't know you as well look at it, and then kind of bridging those two with some feedback is really interesting. So thanks for sharing that. Let's see, Laurel, one piece of non-essay advice that you have for Yale applicants.
Sure. Rarely does an admissions event go by where I don't hear someone preface their question with, I'm a non-traditional MBA candidate. And I always sort of stop them right there because I think probably my colleagues would agree there aren't really traditional versus non-traditional candidates. We're not looking for one sort of specific type of candidate. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice whether you're considering yourself traditional or non-traditional, because even if you come from what I think people are thinking of traditional, like consulting or financial services, kind of well-represented backgrounds, if you're relying on the idea that you're a traditional candidate to tell your story or assume you don't need to fill in the gaps of why you need to go to business school, you're doing yourself a disservice. And if you start from a point of, I don't belong here, so I need to overemphasize why I do, I don't think you're doing yourself a service there. Just tell your story, tell us why what you've done before is leading to where you are now, and don't kind of pre-bucket yourself in a way that's not going to be productive.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Terrific advice. So we have one more fun thing. We'll just do this kind of rapid fire, and then we're going to let you all jump off to your individual Zoom rooms, and then I'll stall with everyone here while we let the schools get into their breakout rooms. But I always love to do this. I always just pick a school who have kind of a fun essay prompt. And today it's Michigan Ross. And so Laurel, tell me what is something that you do that puts you kind of out of your comfort zone?
I feel like this is taboo to say as an admissions officer, but it's meeting new people. I am a hardcore introvert, even though I play an extrovert on TV. So
wow. Okay. Wow. I did not know this about you. Okay. All right. So Rikita, how about you? What's something that puts you out of your comfort zone?
Pretty much any outdoor activity, hiking, any type of recreational outdoor activity, I'm going to be very uncomfortable. We probably really need to prepare to actually do it.
All right. Excellent. Ilana, how about you?
Rikita and Laurel, I'm an indoorsy introvert, so we all need to hang out at some point. But so I'm going to tie mine back to business school. So I think it's honestly when there's like too many options in front of me, I got the analysis paralysis and I can't just make a decision. And I think in business school, you're going to experience that no matter what great school you go to, any of these schools on the panel here, there's going to be so many cool opportunities available to you at any given moment in time. You're going to have to make the decision on what you want to, how you want to spend each moment, whether it's classes, studying, extracurriculars, global immersion, club activities, networking, socializing, so many things in any moment in time. So just kind of be prepared to kind of make those tough decisions and know more opportunities will come in the future. But I know when I was in business school, that's something that it definitely gave me a lot of anxiety to kind of be in a situation with so many things happening and only being able to pick one at a time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think people, when they get to business school, knowing a little bit about what you might want to do after and knowing the community that you're joining by having done your research maybe helps you to kind of figure out what you want to do and not get overwhelmed. But there is a ton on offer at all of your programs. Taya, I feel like this is unfair because you guys must all have to answer these and put them on Post-its on your desks or something. But what puts you out of your comfort zone?
I've definitely seen a few examples of this before. But the pandemic has inspired me to do more road trips. And so I have definitely been out of my comfort zone more when I'm on these hikes and these road trips where I have no cell phone signal. I've definitely learned to be more present and aware of my surroundings. So I know when there's people around or when there's not many gas stations around, but still definitely puts me in my comfort zone.
Okay, excellent. Lisa, how about you? What puts you out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I think like maybe unlike some of my colleagues here today, I am an outdoor cat. So I have had maybe more challenging time over the pandemic with not having as much kind of activity and ability to connect with people, which also makes me super excited for this upcoming year. We're able to do some more things in person and meet more students on the road. So that's something I am actually super excited about to kind of get back to that. So come meet us, come attend some of our events.
Excellent. So with that, I want to sincerely thank Lisa, Laurel, Ilana, Rakita, and Taya for your time today. We're going to let you guys sneak off and get into your individual breakout rooms, and we will provide a link to each of the breakouts in the chat here momentarily. We're just going to give our guests here a couple of minutes to get settled. So thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham.
No, you're welcome. So everyone just stay put here for a second. We're going to give you the links so that you can join the schools as they get settled. But we did want to give them like a minute to be able to get themselves ready to accommodate you. And they will take your individual questions in Zoom in these sessions. While we wait for the minute or so, I just wanted to to just share an admissions tip. I know that we've had a lot of tips today, but one of the things, this is going to sound really basic, but one of the things I would say is that as you kind of have your list of target schools readied, make sure you go onto their websites and actually create an application account. And that's not the step. That's obviously something you're going to have to do, right? But what I want you to do is then go into the application and look through all of it. You know, we've talked about essays today, and I know their interviews and everyone knows their recommendations, but many of these schools have a good number of sort of short answers and other questions in what we call the data form or the application form that can sort of take you by surprise. And I feel like what a lot of candidates do is they spend a lot of time writing the essays, coaching their recommenders, and they leave the data forms or the kind of online application for, oh, that's a test. I'll just do that when I've got everything else together. And they leave it for the last minute. And that's a bad idea, not only because sometimes the school's servers are busier when you get to the end of the application cycle, but more importantly, if you don't know what they're asking you in these little side questions, then you don't have a full picture of what you get to share as an applicant over the course of the application. And so literally, if there's a short answer about something specific, you may not need to cover it in one of your main essays, right? So knowing the sort of full spectrum of what a school is asking you is really important, and getting a head start on that and working on, you know, the resume, the activities list, all these things that you're going to have to upload makes a lot of sense and almost can be smart as a way to kind of level set and get everything sort of ready to then produce the essays too. So just keep that in mind. Go on their website, set up your accounts, get in, look at the application in its entirety. This is actually the fourth session that we've done. It's the final one for now. We will have some more sessions that we do in September and maybe even into October. So stay tuned for more news on that. But I did want to thank everyone for joining. We're going to give you the links here momentarily so that you can join the schools and ask them your individual questions. I had one brief plug that I wanted to make. ClearAdmit has something called ClearAdmit Plus. It's a subscription service. It's only $9.99 a month, or I think it's on sale now for $45 for a year. And it gives you access to a whole slate of additional content that's not currently visible on our website. There's over 4 hours of videos that you can watch with admissions tips. You can tap into all the data we have in Livewire and elsewhere in ways that allow you to really get a better understanding of the admissions process and how it works. We do a private webinar series. So joining ClearAdmit Plus gives you access to all this stuff. I would encourage you to sign up if you can. And now we'll get you the links. Again, thanks to everyone for joining us from all over the world. Be sure to copy these. I know you can't copy the ones that you're seeing on your screen, but they are in the chat and you can copy them from there, because you can go to multiple schools, just not at the same time. So copy them down. We posted them to the chat. And that way, if you want to ask Michigan a question and then bounce off after getting that question answered and spend some time in the Yale chat room, you're welcome to do so. But yeah, grab all these and go have fun talking to the schools. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.